So thank you very much, Didier, for your introduction. And good afternoon, everyone from Europe, Africa, and of course, evening, the one in Asia, and good morning for the one in America. So thank you very much for hosting Didier and on the Leonardo Energy platform. And thank you all of you for taking your time to participate to our webinar today. So today together with me, I'm Thong Vu Van, with Ben and Nikos. We will share with you why we need flexibility and what we do with flexibility within our project, and our key finding with the work we had done so far on the topic of related to regulation, market design, and business model. So this is a short outline of our presentation, so that I will start from the first section. So I will introduce you an overview about the market regulation and renewable development in Europe, and why we need flexibility, and Nikos will introduce the FLEXITRANSTORE project, and then Ben Bowler will give you more detail on the key finding on the topics regulation, market design, business model in order to enable flexibility. And ultimate goal is that to have more renewable energy and also more flexible in the grid, and then how you can follow our future work, and also how you can discuss with us in the future. So I would like to give you an overview of the evolution in the market, so that you know that something is not happened today. That's why we speak about the flexibility, but it's also a kind of evolution. So by the year 1950, we had only private and competitive, and not really interconnected. Then in the years of 60 to 17 of last century, is now we have interconnection in many regions, in many countries, but also that heavily regulated and publicly owned by the, how do you say that, vertical structure, and then this crisis. And then from 80 until now, the starting of competition starts from South Africa, moving to Australia, and then Europe, and then also US, and also now Asia. So in the year, starting from year 2000 in Europe, so that increasing of regulation due to that the concern of environmental and security concern, independence of energy supply. It also reflects to the picture below here, so that you can see that we have different market capacity, energy reserve, new capacity, but also that different time scale, and then depending on the structure, the market and the platform is supported by that, which run by TSO or power exchange, so that we are reaching to a point that it's hard to understand the market today. A brief introduction of regulation in Europe to build up the context. The first one is a market, the second one regulation. We talk about that after 2000, we have more regulation at European level. So you can see that we are talking about the first energy package, the second energy package, and the third energy package. And the reason is that, of course, we want to have harmonization of 27, 28 member states, and to make more common rule amongst the country, more on a single energy market, more to promote renewable energy development. So that this is the moving in the process. So in each state, we have done something. In the first, we are doing unbundling. The second one is that starting of liberalization, and also internal energy market here. And the third is more on the renewable energy development. We also create NCOE and ACER for drafting the network code. So that is starting, and now we are talking about energy vision, or the fourth energy package, so that you can see also the leading is in renewable energy here in Europe, but also we have a higher target in 2030 and 2050 even onward on green energy, renewable energy. Now we talk about 27, but we are pushing to 32% energy efficiency. And so the level of interconnection is trying to be 15% instead of 10% among the countries. And toward 2050, we have even more renewable energy, or even 100%. So that is a vision of Europe, leading to more job creation, leading in renewable energy, more interconnection, more independence among the country. This result in very good development of renewable energy. So that we can see that share from energy in renewable energy double from 2004. It's from here to here. It's in the gigawatt hour. And in some country, we can even see that the renewable energy is very high, something like 100% here, or even in other countries, 34 in Germany, and it's also including hydro, so you can see this number. So it's encouraging the number of renewable energy developed in Europe, but I believe it's the same in other continents, in US, also in China, in India, and also in Africa, where you have also a lot of sun. So it's a kind of revolution or evolution, we can say. So it's catching up. But when introduce a new element like renewable energy, or new one like electric vehicle or heat pump, we also create a new challenges. The challenges, so the number you see is from NCOE, Outlook report. The same is for here, is also the figure here. So you can see this famous curve of residential load above, when we have more renewable energy, photovoltaic wind, and then the load demand become fluctuate. We also need more ramping. For example, like in Germany, we need something like 10 gigawatt for some time, and other countries the same. So it's already around 10%. So that, to cover the fluctuation from renewable energy. So we see that we have load variation, uncertainty, and so how can we cope with the zero or almost zero marginal cost from renewable energy, while still keeping the conventional power plant at a backup. And also that the forecast is also challenging, because we have the different form of rational load demand. And to do that, we need to look the network differently, and we need to find another source of flexibility before it's only from the center large conventional power plant. But now we have to look for another sources in order to maintain the same, at least the same level of security. And for that, the flexibility can be from everywhere. It can be from the conventional power plant. It can be from the network. We can make it the smart network with the transmission and distribution. We also can make it from the storage or industrial load, or we can make it from the residential load. So the flexibility is from everywhere. So luckily, otherwise that we only look at from the generation, the big generation, and we may have trouble. So that leading to our view on the flexibility. So we see 4 scenarios of flexibility. The first one, scenario 1, it can be from flexible conventional fuel. So it can be from coal or gas turbine or other sources which steam can maintain. The second one is can be from storage that we are talking about in some country like in Italy and in other. Installed capacity is something 6 megawatt for the network operation. And the third scenario is that we try to make the network more smart by adding the digital layer in. And the fourth scenario is that from us, from household, me, you and me, we become prosumer. So this is 4 scenario we think, and it's on it will have in the discussion, because you may see that in some country you may go for one, you may favor one scenario than the other because of the resources available. And along with that, you can see on the horizon, when we move from scenario 1 to number 2, or from 3 to 4, the disruption level is higher. Similar that on the vertical thing, that the digitalization is also higher when we move from scenario 1 to number 3 and 4. So here is depending on the available sources and also the investment cost, because the scenario 1, the investment cost is less. Scenario 4 is more. So depending on the situation like that, we will have a better selection. That is leading to our designing of the FLEXITRANSTORE project. And so from my short introduction to you, you have an idea about the market evolution, the regulation, the development of renewable energy, and also the need of flexibility that leading to the reason why we set up this FLEXITRANSTORE project funded by European Commission. And I would like to very happy to introduce you, Nikos, to give a short presentation to the audiences what our project about.
Okay, thank you, Song. Good afternoon from me as well. Well, the FLEXITRANSTORE project is an innovation project which is funded by the European Union's Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Program under the grant agreement number 774407. The project has a total budget of 21.7 million euros, out of which 17 million euros were financed by the European Union. The project kicked off in November of 2017, and it will complete its activities in October of 2021, while it brings together 27 partners across Europe. FLEXITRANSTORE aims to contribute to the evolution towards a pan-European transmission network with high flexibility and high interconnection levels. Let's have a look at the main strategic objectives of the project, which are twofold. First, to enhance and accelerate the integration of renewables into European energy systems, especially addressing imbalances. And second, to increase cross-border electricity flows across Europe. In order to achieve this, a flexible and resilient grid is a prerequisite. Therefore, at the technical level, the FLEXITRANSTORE project will equip the grid with technological breakthroughs and innovative methodologies, unleashing the flexibility and resilience potential. And at a market level, the project will implement novel concepts aiming to create a pan-European energy market under a common framework, free of national restrictions and national legislative barriers, to enable the introduction of new players in the market, creating new business opportunities and incentivizing the provision of flexibility services, and to integrate the southeastern European energy markets where market coupling activities are progressing slowly. The project will target the whole energy value chain, and it will introduce flexibility services for conventional and renewable generation, for the transmission and the distribution grid, and it will explore ways how these services can be incorporated into and remunerated by the wholesale electricity market. The project will prove its concept and test and validate the proposed solutions through 8 real-life demonstrators. The first is the active substation controller with storage integration at the TSO-DSO interface, which will make the interactions between TSO and DSO more flexible and provide congestion relief services. Then the active substation controller with storage integration and the wind park plant substation, which will enable the provision of ancillary or flexibility services by wind parks. Dynamic line rating services, which will increase the flexibility and the resilience of the transmission and the distribution grid by mitigating some of the consequences of extreme weather conditions. Power flow control devices, which will introduce flexibility to the transmission and the distribution grid by relieving congestion in lines and enabling the increase of clean energy penetration. Battery energy storage system for gas turbine generators, making synchronous generation more flexible by enabling higher ramping rates. And again, for conventional generation, a robust generation control through power system stabilizer, which will contribute to the mitigation of the consequences of decreased inertia in a renewables dominated system. Then we have an active substation controller in hardware in the loop simulation, which will provide flexibility through enhanced grid monitoring services and innovative smart controllers. And finally, a wholesale market demonstration and clearing, incorporating flexibility services in wholesale markets, demonstrating attractive and viable ways for their remuneration. The proposed technologies will unleash the flexibility potential of the grid, and combined with novel and effective business models and a framework for intelligent processing, this will lead us to the final outcome, which is a flexibility toolbox, which will include tools for network operators and other involved stakeholders capable of performing a variety of services such as congestion management, grid observability, robust and flexible dispatchable generation, advanced control and monitoring, electrical energy storage, and control cross-border exchanges, and others. Through the combination of the technological solutions with the novel business models and intelligent processing system that was mentioned before, the project will create a multifunctional solution and contribute to the evolution towards a flexible power system, which will be compliant also with the European Union's roadmaps and targets. Although the concept of flexibility has been present for many years now, and research has been addressing it widely, still the picture is unclear and the progress has been limited. So in order to exploit and utilize the flexibility potential, it is necessary to focus on the development of business models and on regulation, and address the reasons that so far hindered the provision of flexibility services. Towards this goal, it is imperative to answer the following questions. What do people perceive as flexibility and flexibility services for the grid? What are the relevant stakeholders' requirements? And finally, what are the current regulatory gaps that need to be bridged in order to allow the realization of the envisioned concept? The answers to these questions will contribute to the wide-scale commercialization of flexibility services, and that is why we're attempting to address those issues within the scope of the FLEXITRANSTORE project. And now I will give the floor to Ben, who will present our methodology, the actions, and our preliminary results. Thank you.
So from a methodology point of view, we're looking at three principal areas, and these have been highlighted in the presentation so far. Firstly, we're looking at regulation. Secondly, we're looking at market design, and thirdly, we're looking at business models, and we see the interrelation of those as being very important. As has already been described, we're looking at this in the context in particular of Southeast Europe, and we're looking at very focused way at Bulgaria and Cyprus, and we're deploying the fixed marketplace in both Bulgaria and Cyprus. It's important that this is relevant to the EU as a whole, however, and so the work that we're doing is very much related to directives, to the clean energy packages that Dong described, and to network codes and so on. So there's a holistic view, and we started off right at the start with a stakeholder survey, and it's that I'm going to talk about now. So in this final section, what I'd like to do is to give a short summary of a survey that was commissioned by the FLEXITRANSTORE project right at the start of the work, to give a short summary of our initial analysis on regulation and on market design relating to flexibility. I'd like to give a short overview of our analysis on the enabling environment for business models of flexibility, and also summarize the value streams that we're going to be progressing in the project based on the research that we've done so far. Firstly, just to introduce this survey, we initiated the project by launching this survey to try and understand trends and views among experts across Europe. And the survey was an electronic survey completed by 45 energy systems experts from organizations across Europe. And those included network and system operators, regulators, policymakers, market operators, energy suppliers, power producers, manufacturers, and academia. You can see the list on the right-hand side. And the largest number of responses that we got were from utilities, from TSOs and manufacturers, and they made up pretty much half of the responses that we got. And the rest was a mix of regulators, associations, consultants, and developers. So a good mix of disciplines and a good mix of countries as well, as you can see from the map. So a summary then of the key findings from the survey. We asked respondents to look at critical topics for the power systems within their countries and to identify what those critical topics are. The highest priorities that they identified were renewable energy integration, and cross-border interconnections and grid stability were also important in both the short and long term. In the short term, wholesale markets and ancillary services were also important. And demand-side flexibility was seen as very much an important part of the low-carbon network. Electricity storage was also something that came up in the responses as a key enabler for flexibility in the future system. As far as the source of flexibility in current systems goes, hydro and flexible fossil fuel-based systems were consistently cited as the main existing sources of flexibility, and the main vehicle for implementing flexibility is still seen as the ancillary services market. So there were a number of controversial points and issues that came out of the survey. There wasn't complete agreement on every topic. Respondents generally understood flexibility, but the flexibility market as a concept created controversy in relation to its definition, in relation to a lack of financial incentives around it, and in relation to immature regulations. There was also a lack of consensus on incentives and incentive setting. So people's opinions differed on whether technology-specific incentives are appropriate, for example, and also whether flexibility markets should be based on standalone trial models, or on extensions to existing ancillary services markets, or by implementing new capacity mechanisms, for example. There was also a lack of agreement on the best place to enable flexibility. So opinions differed on whether future markets for flexibility should focus on prosumers, or it should be open to all, including DSOs. And we also asked about business opportunities for flexibility. However, the responses were interesting. There were no clear commercial opportunities for flexibility itself that were described. The focus was on technical services and not on the commercial implementation of flexible business models within the network. And for us, this implied that there's still a lack of clarity on how flexibility will be commercially deployed. Overall, the view was that the pace of change is insufficient to meet the EU targets for renewable energy integration. And the results of that survey are available. And if you'd like to get in touch with Thong, his email address is available at the end of the presentation. And if you send him an email, he'll be able to send that the results of the survey to you. So moving on now to regulation. There's been a lot published on regulation, and I'm not going to summarize the full suite of documentation that's been published on regulation. These are the main points that seem relevant to our project. So there's a lack of sufficient detail in EU legislation that's currently in force. There are certain provisions in the current regulation, the current electricity market regulation, and although a lot of codification efforts have been underway recently, the core aspects of the market design remain unchanged. There are schemes aimed at protecting existing generation introduced by some EU member states. And while there have been initiatives that allow flexibility services that have been introduced voluntarily by certain member states, these efforts remain an exception rather than a rule. The role played by renewable energy as well and its impact on the network has been distorted by tariffs, by subsidies, and by dispatch arrangements. Going into a little bit more detail on market design, there are barriers also to markets and to market access. Our analysis has shown that there's insufficient intraday liquidity, a lack of churn in markets, and partial implementation of the intraday market in many member states. Self-generators and consumers who have the potential to provide demand and flexibility, therefore as a result of that, not incentivized to invest in equipment that allows for more flexible use of electricity. And they also don't receive feedback when their behavior is non-optimal. So there are inadequate incentives in place for them to participate as flexibility providers. And there are also inadequate incentives in place to encourage balancing responsible parties to be in balance with each other. Now, these factors have a particular impact on demand response. And in fact, the rules often mean that the ability to participate in demand response as a source of flexibility or as a service is often limited to the largest providers of demand response. It's not available to smaller providers. We've also found that there's inadequate market coupling. There are misalignments between gate closure times. There are different products, different definitions, different rules between markets, and timeframes are defined in a way that doesn't really allow renewable energy to participate as a source of flexibility. We've also found that cross-border trading of energy from renewable sources is constrained, which increases the local need for flexible solutions, which reduces choice and further increases cost. And our analysis has shown that the level of market concentration is too high and there's insufficient competition in markets. So what impact does this have on business models? Firstly, price formation doesn't reflect the real-time value of energy, and regulated pricing limits competition, and we've seen this in a number of jurisdictions, and one of the examples in our report was in Bulgaria. Also, there's a lack of scarcity reflected prices. They're not available as a way to reward or value flexible capacity under the current regulatory frameworks. The electricity sector is also still very much dominated by state-owned or vertically integrated energy companies, or by previously state-owned companies that still control significant market shares. And this is exacerbated, or this is also true for unbundling. So there's limited unbundling with TSOs and DSOs, and the impact that this has may limit competition or innovation. Overall, we feel that this creates high barriers to entry to participating in balancing markets and to participating in the markets that are available for flexibility as a whole. Now, in spite of the barriers, there are promising signs of progress, and this slide summarizes part of the enabling environment. Now, it's no means a comprehensive summary. However, it highlights some of the changes that are happening. And the landscape varies by geography, and it continues to change from 1 month to the next. So it's difficult to draw overall conclusions, but I just wanted to highlight some points. On the top left, the TSOs are making various changes to encourage distributed or smaller players to participate in certain member states. There's evidence of regulator and TSO-led changes to wholesale procurement and to balancing ancillary services, with new products being developed or changes being made to existing products to stimulate market actions to provide flexibility services. For example, in National Grid, the National Grid's future balancing strategy is focused on rationalization, on simplification, and improvement of balancing products to encourage new entrants. There's a second group that I'd want to highlight, and that's about market trials. There are joint initiatives taking place that are involving collaboration between TSOs and DSOs, and also initiatives that place the DSO as the lead in the development of flexibility sources. So 2 examples that I'd highlight, or 3 examples actually. Norway is developing a digital market for DSO congestion management. In the Netherlands, the DSO and TSO and a market trading platform organization pilot has been started, and this is to obtain market-based flexibility orders for mitigation of congestion. And in France, just another example, is a project called the Smart Grid Vendée project, and that's aimed to enable the DSO to use flexibility and to test a local flexibility market. This is, as I say, not a comprehensive list, but it just highlights some of the changes that are taking place. And then if I were to draw your attention to the bottom right of the slide, there are also market reforms and market developments that are taking place. So Bulgaria implemented a new day-ahead market, which has been in operation since 2016, and it's implemented this year an intraday market for markets in Bulgaria. The electricity market in Cyprus is expected to be in full operation in 2019, and that will follow the net pool market model. And Greece is also establishing a forward, intraday and balancing market over transition period to complement its current day-ahead market. So changes are taking place. I'd lastly like to look a little bit on value capture for flexibility. And again, there's a lot of information that's been published in general about value capture. So I wanted to focus on the demonstration projects that we're working on in the FLEXITRANSTORE, and to talk about some of the real specific cases that we're looking at in relation to value capture. So there are a number of demos taking place, and we will develop commercial business models and a number of flexibility use cases around those. And what we'll be able to do is trial them both on hardware in the real world and on a fictive marketplace that Nikos mentioned, aligned to the Nord Pool platform. They will represent real-world commercial opportunities within the categories that are shown on the slide. Firstly, looking at the left-hand side, flexible conventional fuel. So one example is we're planning to deploy a battery storage system alongside a CCGT. And the project's in discussion with a number of possible host plants, each with a slightly different business model in mind, and they all believe that their business models will make the project commercially viable. So we expect it to be a subset, a focus of one of the items that are on the bullet points on the left-hand side there. Secondly, flexibility from bulk storage. Now again, a lot's been published on the opportunities for bulk storage. We plan to deploy batteries alongside a wind farm, and also as a standalone resource within an active distribution mode. And for the standalone distribution mode, we're looking at reserve and load shifting, so arbitrage for that as a business model. And we're also looking at a number of different options for the wind plant, still in discussion, but frequency response and renewable energy firming are 2 options there. Lastly, there are a mix of possible outcomes that could apply for network optimization and congestion management, which are also applicable to the active distribution mode, and those are summarized under scenario 3 and scenario 4. So we expect to build commercial business cases around congestion management, around provision of reserve, around avoidance of network charges, and possibly also capacity markets for the active distribution mode. node. And the link to the fictive marketplace is really important here, as we're hoping to build on some of the existing work that I described in relation to markets on the previous slide. So that brings me to the end of my short section. I will just provide a very short summary of the presentation so far. So we've given a vision of the energy union, and Thong's described the growth of renewable energy within Europe and highlighted how that it creates an increased demand for flexibility. We've highlighted that those changes are not uniform across the EU, and Thong described a different mix of outcomes being likely. We find it helpful to talk about those in terms of a 4-quadrant model, and to think about how far into each of those quadrants future scenarios will be within each country. There are significant regulatory and market barriers that still exist, and these are limiting innovation and restricting new entrants. However, there are new business models and new commercial opportunities that are emerging as the enabling environment gradually opens up, and there's evidence of commercial opportunities being available for flexibility within today's market. Lastly, and Thong will say a little bit more about this, but we, as Thong said, and as Nikos said earlier on in the presentation, we're at the start of a process with this project. We would very much like to connect with people that are working in this industry and working on the topics, and to continue the discussion with them. Thong's going to mention a Slack channel that we're opening up now, so as well as providing some other ways in which to connect with us and to stay in touch. So Thong, I'll hand over to you for the last slide.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ben. As I mentioned, you can, this is some preliminary results and some early key findings, and we are working hard to make it happen, to make it more concrete. And we believe that we can better work with you, so that if you believe so, and then if in such case that you can connect with us via different channels. It can be from via the website, or from the Twitter, or LinkedIn, or you can email me at a spoke for this topic. And very important, we are opening a channel at Slack, so that you can enter the room and discuss with us, but also with other colleagues participating in this call, and also others cannot, so that you are free to click to this one. And Didier here is already mentioned in the chat box, so you can click into this Slack link that in the chat box that Didier put in, and then fill in your name, and then we will initiate a discussion in coming weeks. So we really encourage you to enter this Slack at a kind of living discussion forum on this topic heavily, so that you will have the chance to discuss and then see what your view and other on this topic. And we also try to collect with you and then build up with you on this topic openly. And on behalf of the FLEXITRANSTORE project consortium partners, we have 28 partners here. I could like to thank you for attending this webinar, and we are ready to answer any questions from you. Thank you.